I think one of the greatest rhythmical adventures that I've ever had was being in Barcelona and going to the kind of a club that the local people go to. It would not be like going to the best club that you would take an American tourist. It was the kind of, when I finished my concert, I asked our promoter if they would take me to a club that the people of Barcelona would go to rather than the kind of first-class place that they would normally take an American, right?
This is a lover of flamenco talking. His name is Buddy Rich, and of course you know him as one of the great percussionists of the world, and also, too, an indomitable spirit behind show business, and of course whose roots began way back in vaudeville. And when he was very young, he went to Australia and did a show, and about 11 he ran his own band. But let's talk more about olives and wine and Barcelona and flamenco, since rhythm and time is your life.
Yes, exactly. And I was explaining to you before that we were doing a concert in Barcelona. This was just over 2 years ago. We do an annual tour in Europe. And after our concert, I asked to be taken to a club that the people would go to. And I sat from midnight until 5 in the morning eating garlic olives and cheese and drinking wine and screaming at the top of my lungs at the performance of there were 16 girls in the line and 5 musicians on the stage. And the rhythmic patterns that they dance to and that they sing to and the way they play guitar is unknown over here. It isn't the kind of commercial rhythm that, we say, Jose Greco would perform at the Sahara Hotel in Vegas. This is the kind of a rhythm that I had great difficulty in trying to figure out the time signature. I couldn't tell if it was in 5 or if it was in 12, and yet the people on the stage were so exact and so absolutely perfect in their rhythmical counting that it was an absolute thrill for me. And of course, I wanted to meet the people that were performing, but they spoke no English whatsoever, not even hello. And of course, I speak no Spanish. But it was just kind of a communicating feeling. They knew, I think by the time I left, there were maybe 5, 6 people in the audience, and they knew that I had been there for about 3 performances. And they knew that something was going on because I loved them. You could feel the love. And I think that was one of the great experiences of my touring the world. I've been every place in the world, and I think that probably was one of the most outstanding nights of my career.
And of course, the flavor of Spain itself is something that begins to move in and capture your blood.
You have to be there. It isn't like you can explain Paris, and it isn't like you can explain England or Germany. It's so completely foreign, and it's so completely Spanish. You know, it's like no other place. It's like no other country. And I don't think there's any other feeling. It's a very warm, very romantic kind of attitude that they have in the country. It was just marvelous.
And you might add, I suppose, that it's a touch of the past combined with the present, and the mixture is really something hard to define.
I think perhaps they're the only people who can perform the past and the present and make it the present. I don't think that there's anything in their musical approach that is past. I think it's so progressive that it's tomorrow, always.
Buddy Rich, talking about flamenco and the Spanish heritage, and thank you ever so much for those really sensitive comments about something you like very much.
Something I love very much, and thank you for coming in tonight.
Off stage at the Prom Center, and it's been another excellent night in behalf of the concert and the big band. Dick Clay, a graduate of the Billy May Band, and Harry Given, who's also a graduate of the big band Circa and Circle and Fraternity, have once again had a splendid night. Buddy Rich has been host, and Buddy, this is just purely reminiscence now. If I mention these 2 names, Wilson and Rich, what memories do you have?
Oh, that's my dad and his partner in vaudeville back in about 1920, 21, something like that.
How about Raymond Hitchcock's Pinwheel? Does that evoke a memory?
No, Raymond Hitchcock's Pinwheel, I think, was the first Broadway show that I ever appeared in, and that was about 1925, 1926, something like that, I would say.
What was your role in that production?
I think I was the youngest single drum prodigy, if you'll excuse my expressions, but that's what it was called in those days. I think I was the second highest paid child star outside of Jackie Coogan in those days. And in I guess the latter part of the 20s, I started out as a single. That's when I went out on my own and used to dance and play drums and sing and do bad jokes.
Which sounds like a great art form to me.
Well, it's the greatest way to start in this business. If you're going to start in this business, you might as well start very young and get all the knocks in early so that when you're a little older, you can appreciate the good things.
Chronologically, what does the Hickory House say to you?
Hickory House was my first job in a jazz band with Joe Marcella in 1937 in New York City, 52nd Street. That's when 52nd Street was the mecca of all jazz. That was my first job with a Dixieland band, and from there I went on to different things.
Bunny Berrigan?
Well, I went from the Hickory House. I joined Bunny Berrigan's band in 38, and let me see, I'll beat you to the next one. From there I went with Artie Shaw.
And that, of course, was an experience in its own, right?
Well, it was a great musical experience. I suppose you could say it was a challenge to personalities as far as experience goes. Artie and I never did get along, but musically, it was a great step to further my career.
And, of course, Tommy Dorsey.
I went with Tommy after I left Artie Shaw. I went with Tommy Dorsey. And, of course, that was in 1939. 1940 was the big event when Sinatra joined the band in Chicago, I believe. He was working at the College Inn with Harry James in Chicago at the Sherman Hotel, and Tommy went across to hear him, and 2 weeks later he joined the band. That's when Tommy made the complete switch from the kind of sentimental gentleman that the band's fame was based on. And that's when he hired Cy Oliver to come in and write for the band. That's when he hired Joe Stafford and the Pied Pipers. He hired Sinatra. I was with the band. And I think the transition took place in 40 to the kind of a semi-dance jazz band that Dorsey had.
How would you describe Tommy's leadership?
I think that Tommy was probably one of the great band leaders. I think he also was the first band leader who realized that it wasn't sufficient just to be a great musician. I think he was the first band leader to realize to have more than just yourself up in front of the band meant more business and more money for him. By adding people who could add stature to a band, he was the first one to do it. He was the first one to I think, exploit, if that's the right word, Sinatra's talents. He was the first one to exploit my talents. Ziggy Elman was on that particular band. And I think a lot of band leaders learned from Dorsey that just being a band leader was not important, but surrounding yourself with great people was important.
Utilizing skills, talent, artistry.
Other people's made him a big man. It was a very smart move on his part. He always had great people in his band.
Finally, Benny Carter.
Well, I never worked for Benny Carter. I played in Benny Carter's band while I was waiting. I joined the Marine Corps in 42, and Benny Carter was working in Los Angeles. And while waiting to be called up, I used to go in and sit in with Benny's band at a place called the Swing Club in Hollywood. But I never worked for Benny Carter. Benny Carter and I have been friends for years, but that kind of kept me in shape while I was waiting to be called into the service.
Well, this is a brief chronology of another time and another space.
Right,
Buddy Rich, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.